Well, before we go, I want to go to one more place with you. I want you to go with me to Hebrews 6. You passed Hebrews, so back up, Hebrews 6. One of the most controversial chapters in the Bible, but we're not going to go through the controversial part. We're going to go through the good part, starting in verse 11. Because I want to share this with you. Love of the truth, in 2 Thessalonians 2, we read for our text, is the proof of salvation. Lost ones never receive the love of the truth. They never seek out and find Christ's offer of salvation. To not love the truth leads us to shipwreck. Remember, I told you about that? They've shipwrecked in their faith. Paul describes them. What can cause a soul to be shipwrecked? False teaching, believing a lie. So how do we stay safe as the days get dark and the shadow of the tribulation is cast across our society and our media and our culture? As popular television series are about occult, demonism, or immorality, as more and more movies are making people open and susceptible to demonic stuff, as that dark shadow comes across every realm of our daily life, what's the only way that we can make it in these dark days preceding the return of Christ? Well, Hebrews 6, starting in verse 11, tells us, and that's where we're going to pick up tonight. Because the only way to stay safe as our world darkens, as our culture crumbles, and as the truth dies, and we know that the end of the world is near, is by checking the anchor of our soul. Jesus says if you're truly born again, your soul is tied with a rope, the other end of which is already in heaven. In fact, it's not just in heaven, it's inside the Holy of Holies, in the very presence of God, the other end of the rope. That's part of our security. We're anchored in heaven. Jesus warned the church would fill up with fruitless counterfeits. And when that happens, it's time for believers to brace for the storm. The way you brace for the storm is to know that your anchor line is holding you strongly and tugging you toward heaven. And let me just read Hebrews 6:11. And we desire that each one of you show the same diligence to a full assurance. Plerophoreo, interesting word. It means overflowingly to hold and possess something. Your assurance of salvation should not just be just barely there. You should have a full assurance of salvation and of your hope to the end. Verse 12, don't become sluggish, but imitate those who through faith and patience inherit the promise. Skip down to verse 18. By two immutable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we might have strong consolation. Now look at this. Who have fled for refuge to lay hold on the hope set before us. Verse 19. This hope we have as an anchor of the soul. Boy, that's good, but it doesn't stop there. It is sure, it is steadfast, and it enters the presence behind the veil. Got to know a little Old Testament to decipher that. The presence speaks of God. Behind the veil speaks of the tabernacle and temple, and that there was this veil dividing the people from the Holy of Holies. Remember, it was torn in half at the cross. But there's a copy. The earth was a copy. The original is in heaven. And he's talking about the original temple that Moses saw that God has in heaven. And look at this, which enters the presence behind the veil, where the forerunner has entered for us, even Jesus, having become high priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. You know, I'll just summarize all this. Do you know what this says? You know how God looks at me? He looks at me as if I'm already in heaven. He already sees me in the Holy of Holies. He sees me because of Christ's finished work. He sees the other end of the cord. He sees me already there. And what Jesus is doing in between is Jesus has lassoed me with a cord that can never be broken, and he is pulling me through this world, one pull at a time, and tugging my heart toward heaven. And I have a choice, either to be looking and saying, come quickly, or to be like this, and him pulling me, go, oh man, I don't want to leave all this behind. Come on, I want to do that one more time. I like all my sin. Then he has to jerk and spank and everything else. But Jesus anchors our soul in heaven. And you want to know how to make it through the false teaching of this world? Love the truth so much that you know your soul is anchored. And as this scripture says, that it is sure and steadfast, and that by God's grace you've already entered the presence of God. That's what assurance is.